Everything you've ever heard or read about the Dyatlov Pass is only half the story. People talk about Yetis or alien encounters, but the real evidence? That was hidden in plain sight. If you haven't seen those 3 specific photos found inside the tent, you haven't seen the full picture. Today, I'm showing you the truth that maybe, just maybe, was never meant to come out. Let's dive in. Imagine this. It's -30 degrees, you're sleeping inside your tent, and suddenly, you realize there is something outside, and it's waiting for you. What happened to those 9 hikers in 1959 isn't just a mystery, it's a nightmare that will keep you up at night. The tent wasn't ripped from the inside, it was cut from the outside. But by who? And why? Today, we're reconstructing their final moments. Was the tent cut by human hands, or by a force we still don't understand today? Scientists spent decades, the authorities closed the files, yet that one question remains unsolved. In this video, we aren't looking at conspiracy theories. We are looking at the actual forensic files and the evidence from that night. Before we start, understand this: after what you see today, your perspective on this case will change forever. February 1st. 1959, high in the frozen Ural Mountains, 9 experienced hikers made camp for what they believed would be just another cold winter night. Their tent was standing, their food was prepared, their cameras were safely packed away, and tomorrow's route had already been planned. But before sunrise, something happened inside that tent, something so terrifying, that every one of them grabbed a knife, slashed their own shelter open from the inside, and ran into the freezing darkness. Some without boots, some without coats, none of them would ever return alive. More than 60 years later, investigators still can't answer one simple question. What could frighten trained explorers so badly, that certain death outside seemed safer than staying inside the tent? Late January 1959, the Soviet Union was in the middle of another brutal winter. Across the endless forests and frozen mountains of the northern Urals, temperatures had already fallen far below freezing. Blizzards arrived without warning, powerful winds erased footprints within minutes, and survival depended entirely on experience. It was the perfect environment for a difficult expedition, and that was exactly what a group of young university hikers had been training for. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an intelligent engineering student, respected for his calm decisions, careful planning, and remarkable ability to survive in extreme conditions. He had successfully completed challenging expeditions before, and every member chosen for this journey carried the highest level of Soviet hiking certification. These weren't reckless adventurers searching for danger. They were disciplined, experienced, and fully prepared for everything the mountains could throw at them. Or so they believed. The journey began with excitement. Cameras captured smiling faces. Heavy backpacks rested comfortably on strong shoulders. Friends joked as they loaded equipment onto trains heading toward the northern wilderness. No one looked frightened, because there was nothing unusual about the expedition. They had maps, compasses, warm clothing, medical supplies, enough food for weeks, and complete confidence in their leader. Every step had been carefully planned long before they left home. Families waved goodbye, expecting to welcome them back within a few weeks. None of them imagined they were witnessing the final photographs these young hikers would ever take together. After days of traveling by train, truck, and finally on skis, the group reached the edge of civilization. Beyond this point, there were no roads, no villages, no telephone lines, only endless forests, frozen rivers, and mountains covered by deep snow. It was a world where silence ruled everything. The hikers seemed to enjoy every moment. They laughed while setting up camp, photographed each other during breaks, and wrote cheerful diary entries describing their adventure. Those journals would later become some of the most important pieces of evidence, because they revealed nothing unusual. No fear, no panic, no sign that anyone felt threatened. One member of the expedition, Yuri Yudin, suddenly developed severe pain caused by illness. Continuing into the mountains would have placed everyone at risk. After discussing the situation with Dyatlov, he made the difficult decision to return home alone. It disappointed him deeply, but he believed he would simply meet his friends again after the expedition ended. Standing beside the trail, he watched the group disappear into the snow, smiling, waving goodbye, completely unaware that this would become the last time he would ever see any of them alive. Years later, Yuri would say that saying goodbye to his friends haunted him for the rest of his life, because a simple illness had unknowingly saved him from sharing their fate. The remaining 9 hikers continued climbing toward their final destination. Every photograph taken during those final days showed confidence, determination, and friendship. They built camps with precision, cooked meals together, repaired equipment, and joked despite the freezing temperatures. Everything appeared completely normal. But hidden somewhere beyond the endless white landscape, something waited. Something powerful enough to erase every plan they had made. Something that would transform an ordinary winter expedition into one of the greatest mysteries in modern history. By the afternoon of February 1st, the weather began changing faster than anyone expected. The clear sky disappeared behind thick gray clouds. Powerful winds swept across the mountain, carrying snow so heavily that even experienced hikers struggled to see more than a few meters ahead. Dyatlov realized the group had drifted off their planned route. Instead of reaching the shelter of the forest before nightfall, they had climbed onto the exposed eastern slope of Koletsyakal, a mountain whose name in the Mansi language means Dead Mountain. To the hikers, it was simply another obstacle. They didn't believe in legends. They believed in maps, training, and experience. Turning back meant losing valuable time. Continuing forward meant fighting the storm. Dyatlov made the decision to stop where they were and set up camp directly on the mountainside. It wasn't the safest place, but they had survived difficult conditions before. Working together, they cut into the snow to create a flat platform. Anchored the tent against the violent wind. Secured every rope, every pole, every piece of equipment. By sunset, the camp was finally complete. Smoke from their small stove rose briefly into the freezing air before disappearing into the storm. From the outside, everything looked perfectly normal. Inside the tent, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different from the freezing world outside. Wet gloves and jackets were hung to dry. Boots were neatly placed near the entrance. Cameras, journals, and personal belongings were arranged carefully along the sides of the tent. Someone cracked another joke. Someone else wrote the final lines in a diary. Another camera captured what would become one of the last photographs ever taken. No fear appeared on their faces. No one mentioned danger. If anything had already begun outside the tent, none of them seemed aware of it. Then, sometime during the night, everything changed. No one knows the exact time, because there were no survivors left to tell the story. But investigators would later discover something deeply disturbing. The entrance of the tent had never been used. Instead, the fabric had been slashed open from the inside with a knife. Several long cuts tore through the canvas, creating openings just large enough for desperate people to crawl through. Whatever happened inside those few terrifying seconds, happened so suddenly, and felt so dangerous, that 9 experienced hikers chose to escape through the side of their own tent, rather than spend even a single extra second searching for the normal exit. The snow outside was freezing. Temperatures had fallen below -30 degrees Celsius. Yet footprints found later showed something investigators struggled to explain. The group didn't scatter in panic. They walked, almost calmly, down the slope. Some wearing only socks. Others completely barefoot. Most without heavy winter coats. Leaving behind boots, food, axes, extra clothing, flashlights, and everything needed to survive the night. 4 people trained in winter survival, abandoning that equipment made absolutely no sense. Unless, whatever frightened them inside the tent, seemed far more dangerous than the deadly cold waiting outside. Hours passed. The storm erased almost every trace of what had happened. Silence returned to Dead Mountain. No rescue teams knew the hikers were missing. No one realized 9 young explorers were now wandering through one of the coldest nights imaginable. While families back home waited for postcards and photographs, the mystery of Dyatlov Pass had already begun. And with every passing hour, the chances of finding anyone alive grew smaller. Part 3. February 12th. Came and went. The hikers never arrived at the village where they were supposed to send a telegram confirming their safe return. At first, no one was worried. Delays were common in winter expeditions. Bad weather could keep experienced climbers trapped for days. Families waited patiently, believing Igor Dyatlov would eventually appear with another story, another photograph, another successful adventure. But as the days turned into weeks, hope slowly gave way to fear. Something had gone terribly wrong in the Ural Mountains. On February 20th, rescue teams were finally organized. Fellow students, experienced mountaineers, local volunteers, soldiers, and later even aircraft joined the search. Helicopters circled endlessly above the snow-covered peaks, while teams on skis followed every possible route the hikers might have taken. Day after day, they searched frozen valleys, dense forests, and mountain ridges, finding nothing. Until one cold afternoon, a dark shape appeared beneath the snow. It was the tent. The rescuers rushed toward it, expecting to find injured survivors sheltering inside. Instead, they found complete silence. The tent was still standing, partially buried beneath drifting snow. But something immediately caught everyone's attention. The canvas had been cut open, from the inside. Long knife slashes stretched across one side of the shelter. The entrance remained closed. Almost as if the hikers had deliberately ignored the normal exit, choosing instead to escape through the fabric itself. Inside the tent, everything looked strangely ordinary. Blankets remained in place. Cameras, journals, food, medicines, spare boots, heavy winter coats, even personal belongings, had all been left behind. Nothing suggested the group had planned to leave. In fact, it looked as though they expected to return only a few minutes later. But they never did. That single discovery raised a question investigators still debate today. What could force 9 experienced hikers, to abandon every piece of life-saving equipment, in temperatures cold enough to kill within hours. Then came another disturbing discovery. A line of footprints leading away from the tent. The prints belonged to the hikers themselves. Some wore boots. Others only socks. And several appeared completely barefoot. Even stranger, the footprints showed no signs of panic. There were no deep impressions from running. No evidence of a violent struggle. They seemed to walk, calmly, down the mountain. Into the darkness. Into the freezing forest below. The rescue team followed those tracks for nearly a mile, until they reached the edge of a large cedar tree. There, beneath its towering branches, they found the first two bodies. Both men were barefoot, dressed only in underwear. Their hands were burned. Their fingers torn and bleeding. As if they had desperately tried to climb the tree. Nearby, the remains of a small fire still lay beneath the snow. They had tried to survive. They had fought until the very end. But whatever they were hiding from, had reached them long before the cold did. The discovery of the first two bodies shocked everyone. But what investigators found next turned an already tragic accident into one of history's greatest mysteries. A few hundred meters away, lying face down in the snow, was the body of Igor Dyatlov himself. His frozen hands were stretched forward, as though he had been crawling back toward the tent. Fighting against exhaustion, against the freezing wind, against death itself. Only a short distance away, another member of the group was found in almost the same position. Then another. One after another, they seemed to form a silent trail. A desperate line of people, all trying to return to the safety of the camp they had abandoned only hours before. None of them made it. At first, investigators believed the cause of death was obvious. Hypothermia. The brutal cold alone could explain why several hikers had died. But the more evidence they collected, the less sense the case began to make. Why had they left the tent in the first place? Why had trained mountaineers abandoned boots, heavy jackets, food, and survival equipment? Why did they calmly walk into the freezing darkness, instead of running back once the immediate danger had passed? Every answer created two new questions. Weeks later, after the snow began melting, another search operation uncovered the final four missing hikers. They were buried beneath several meters of snow, inside a narrow ravine. Their bodies were far better protected from the wind. But the injuries they carried stunned even experienced forensic experts. One victim had multiple broken ribs. Another suffered a crushed chest so severe, doctors compared it to injuries seen in high-speed car crashes. One woman, Ludmila Dubinina, was missing her tongue, along with soft tissue inside her mouth. Yet strangely, almost none of them showed major external wounds. Their skin remained largely intact, while their internal injuries were catastrophic. It was as if an enormous invisible force had struck them, without leaving obvious marks. The autopsy reports only deepened the mystery. There were no knife wounds. No bullet holes. No signs of a prolonged fight. Alcohol wasn't involved. There was no evidence that another group had attacked them. The surrounding area revealed almost no unfamiliar footprints. It appeared as though the 9 hikers had been completely alone. And yet, something had forced every one of them to abandon the only shelter they had. Then came one final discovery. One that fueled conspiracy theories for decades. Several items of clothing recovered from the victims showed unusually high levels of radioactive contamination. Investigators never fully explained why. Some believed it came from previous work involving radioactive materials. Others suspected secret military experiments taking place somewhere in the mountains. Combined with reports from nearby witnesses claiming to have seen strange orange lights moving across the night sky, the Dyatlov Pass incident transformed from a tragic accident into one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. As news of the strange deaths spread across the Soviet Union, rumors began spreading even faster. Some whispered that the hikers had wandered into a secret military testing zone. Others believed they had witnessed something they were never supposed to see. Local Mansi hunters were questioned, but investigators quickly ruled them out. There was no evidence of an attack, no signs of robbery, and no unfamiliar tracks surrounding the campsite. Whoever, or whatever, had driven the hikers from their tent, seemed to have left almost no trace behind. Then investigators turned their attention to the mountain itself. One theory suggested that a powerful avalanche had forced the group to escape. At first, it sounded reasonable. But when search teams carefully examined the campsite, the evidence didn't fit. The tent was still partially standing. The ski poles supporting it remained in place. There wasn't enough snow covering the tent to indicate a massive avalanche. And perhaps most importantly, the footprints leading away from the campsite had survived for days. A large avalanche should have erased them completely. Slowly, the avalanche theory began to lose its strength. Another theory focused on the weather. Scientists suggested that violent katabatic winds, powerful blasts of freezing air rushing down the mountainside, may have produced terrifying low-frequency sounds. Known as infrasound, these vibrations cannot always be heard by the human ear, but some researchers believe they can trigger extreme anxiety, panic, dizziness, and an overwhelming urge to escape. Could 9 experienced hikers have fled their tent, not because of something they saw, but because of something they felt? It was an interesting idea. Yet no one could explain why they never returned once they were safely away from the tent. Then came the military theories. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union conducted countless secret weapons tests. Witnesses reported mysterious glowing orange spheres moving silently across the night sky during the same period. Some believed experimental rockets, parachute mines, or classified explosives had been tested near the mountain. Others pointed to the radioactive clothing as possible evidence. But despite decades of speculation, no official documents have ever confirmed that a military operation caused the deaths. The theory remained exactly that, a theory. As the years passed, even stranger explanations emerged. Some claimed the hikers encountered an unknown creature hiding deep within the Ural Mountains. Others blamed extraterrestrials, supernatural forces, or mysterious creatures from local folklore. Books, television shows, and documentaries transformed Dyatlov Pass into one of the world's greatest paranormal mysteries. Yet behind every sensational headline, one uncomfortable fact remained unchanged. No theory has ever explained every piece of evidence. Not the cut tent. Not the footprints. Not the internal injuries. Not the missing tongue. And not the decisions made by 9 highly experienced hikers during their final hours. More than 6 decades later, investigators still return to the same frozen mountains, carrying better technology, better maps, and better scientific knowledge. But every expedition leaves with the same unanswered question. What really happened on Dead Mountain, during the night of February 1st? 1959. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the Dyatlov Pass investigation. For the first time in decades, modern forensic experts, avalanche specialists, and computer simulations were used to re-examine the evidence. After months of analysis, officials announced their conclusion. The hikers had most likely been forced from their tent by a rare type of slab avalanche. According to the report, a heavy layer of compacted snow slowly shifted above the campsite, crushing part of the tent, injuring several members, and convincing the group that a larger avalanche could strike at any moment. They cut their way out, moved downhill to escape the danger, and planned to return once the situation became safe. But in the freezing darkness, separated from their equipment, they never found their way back. To many scientists, the explanation made sense. Computer models showed that under certain conditions, delayed slab avalanches could occur even on relatively gentle slopes. It offered answers to several